At some point in the next few weeks, we're going to find out whether Alex Kurtzman has got more run with Star Trek. Personally, I hope he doesn't, but I wanted to explore how, if I was Alex Kurtzman, or if I was the new head of Star Trek, how I would reboot the franchise. If you look over the last 10 years of Kurtzman Trek, there's some patterns of where it has failed. So if you look at where they have had success, it has been in the 23rd century, the 24th century, and the 25th century. That being Strange New Worlds, Lower Decks, and Picard. And some of those are hits and misses, but generally they've been the most well-received versions of Star Trek. So the first thing I would do is I would put the franchise back into one of those eras. So whether that be 23rd century, so around Kirk's time, whether that be Lost era time, or even into the next gen era and post next gen era, but that kind of window is where it needs to be placed. That will bring the fans on board, but it also is more familiar to people. So all of this kind of new technology of, warp nacelles that just float will all kind of fall away. Second, I changed the way the writing works. If you look at what's happened recently in Kurtzman Trek, you've had huge galactic stakes. Star Trek's never had, in TV series, huge galactic stakes in the way that it has with Discovery and Starfleet Academy. And the problem is that it's hard to build that up. So you end up with these huge stakes that basically at the end you have an unsatisfying solution. So the burn was basically a crying child. Or you have the opposite version of that where you don't even see the huge galactic consequences till the end, and it all has to wrap up really fast before you've got invested in the stakes. This is because they are trying to make big external problems. If you look at the success of Star Trek at The Next Generation, if you look at Star Trek Voyager, it was about the huge stakes for the characters. So it was about Voyager being lost and having to get home and being light on supplies and overcoming adversity. It was about huge stakes for the crew, not the galaxy. And so it's very hard in 10 episodes, especially when you're trying to develop the characters, to actually get us invested in these huge stakes, especially when, in the example of Starfleet Academy, the huge stakes appear in the second to last episode, and now you're kind of going to invest in all of this stuff really fast and get it solved really fast. Doesn't make sense. Or the burn, you build something up to this big, huge thing and have a really unsatisfying ending. So I would flip back to episodic, and I would flip back to character stories or moral dilemmas that are not galaxy ending. They have high stakes, and with good writing, you can get us to invest in those stories, in those characters, going through those difficult situations. So that's what would work. Thirdly, I would cut some of the special effects. They're a massive distraction. I think personally, in some of the episodes of Starfleet Academy, the sets, the graphics, the visuals, one thing you cannot criticize is the quality of Alex Kurtzman's visual effects. You cannot really say that they were poor. They were very, very good. And I think that is part of the reason that the show didn't perform. There was too much going on, too much focus on how cool it looked, and not enough focus on how good the story was. So I would trim down some of the special effects because I think it's just a distraction. Some of the things that happened were so fast, so quick, that you couldn't even appreciate the quality of it. The bridge of the USS Athena, it looks really cool, but we didn't get to see very much of it. So they spent a lot of money on this set that we didn't really get to appreciate and get to used to and figure out where everything is. So it was background noise. And then the final thing I would do is, the biggest cast member of a show is the ship. And all of Kurtzman Trek, with the exception of Lower Decks, all of Kurtzman Trek has not really made the ship a character. They tried with Sora in Discovery, but it wasn't really a ship. We loved the Enterprise. We loved Voyager. We loved the Enterprise D. I know I said something else there, which I won't do because the Enterprise D has another connotation. We love those ships. But you look and you go, Discovery, it's just a ship. Yeah. The Enterprise, I think the Strange New Worlds Enterprise is really cool. And yet we don't really see much of it in combat. We don't see it doing anything. It's just a vessel to carry the crew. So I would bring back this feeling that the ship is a character. Now, we don't know what's going to happen with Star Trek. We might not see Star Trek for another 10 years. We have no idea what's going to happen. But I do hope that Paramount, CBS, whatever they're going to be called in the new world once Warner Brothers merges, I do hope that actually they treat the franchise and look at what's worked for the franchise. Gene Roddenberry's vision of a utopian society is an incredible thing. And one of the mistakes I think Kurtzman Trek did was it went too dark and tried to be too clever in places. But I do hope somebody comes who goes, let's take the spirit of Star Trek, modernize it, sure, but let's not lose sight of what it's really about. It's about exploration. It's about moral dilemma. It's about learning lessons subtly through adventures and stories that play out that we can engage with. So I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that it will get better. I'm hopeful that this chapter is closed. I think in 10 years' time, I know there's a lot of people who like Starfleet Academy, a lot of people who like Discovery, and that's cool if you do. I don't. But I do think that when we're looking back on this in 10 years' time, I don't think that this era of Star Trek will have the same rewatch value, the same longevity, because it was the stories, the human stories that transcended visual effects, transcended all of these things. If you look, how many of you rewatch TNG or DS9 or Voyager when you've watched it over and over and over again? You can probably recite the words, but you watch it over and over again. I don't think Kurtzman Trek's going to have that longevity. But I do hope, and I am hopeful, that Star Trek's roots will be rediscovered and we'll have something new soon.